He was rebuilding the house we said we'd grow old in. Every wall, every floor, every inch, for me. And while he worked late into the night, I was answering messages from a man I swore I'd never let back in. I told myself it was just coffee. Then just a hotel. Then just a mistake. But by the time the house was finished, I was someone I didn't recognize anymore. This is my confession. I used to think cheating meant passion. Fire. Something you couldn't stop even if you tried. But that's not how it was for me. For me, it started with quiet. Not emptiness, not even unhappiness. Just quiet. David and I had been married for 12 years. We weren't unhappy. We weren't anything, really. We functioned. We coexisted. He worked long days, came home tired. I kept the house running, paid the bills, did what needed to be done. We had routines, shared passwords, inside jokes we hadn't used in years. We also had a plan, one that we'd been saving toward forever. The house. It was my grandmother's, left to me after she passed. Small, a little broken, but full of bones we both loved. We'd always said we'd fix it up, make it ours, grow old in it. So when we finally had the money, David said he'd do the work himself, slowly, room by room, to save us the cost. "I want to build this for us," he said, hands on blueprints, eyes bright like the man I first fell for. And I believed him. More than that, I loved him for it. But something shifted in the process. He started spending every evening at the house working late into the night. He came home with dust in his hair, paint on his arms, too tired to talk. At first, I understood. I even joined him on weekends, painted trim, picked tile, listened to him talk about wood types and floor levels like they were love languages. But slowly I stopped going, and he stopped noticing. We stopped touching, stopped kissing, stopped seeing each other. It wasn't cold, just numb. We'd eat dinner, clean up, and retreat to our separate corners of the house. We didn't fight. We just faded. One night I sat on the edge of our bed while he showered, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time he looked at me without checking for drywall in my hair. Then, one afternoon, a message. Jared. My ex. Not the kind of ex you forget. The one you spent too many years trying to save. The one who gave you highs so high they felt like air, and lows so dark you stopped trusting yourself. We hadn't spoken in 8 years. Not since I blocked him after the last time he texted, "I miss you," at 2:14 a.m. Now it was 2:14 p.m., and the message just said, "I saw your name on someone's listing. Couldn't help myself. Hope you're doing okay. Coffee?" I stared at it for 10 minutes. I could have ignored it. I should have. Instead, I wrote, "Sure, just coffee." That night I told David. I don't know why I said anything. Guilt, maybe. Or maybe I just wanted to see if he'd care. "Hey," I said while he wiped sawdust off his jeans. "I'm gonna meet Jared for coffee tomorrow." He messaged. Said something happened. Sounds like he needs to talk. David glanced up. "Jared?" "Yeah, the X period." He hesitated. "Everything okay?" "I think so," I said, trying to sound casual. "It's not a thing. He just sounded off." David nodded slowly. "You okay seeing him?" "Totally fine." He shrugged. "All right, you're a grown woman." That was it. He trusted me, and somehow that made it worse. That night, lying beside him, I stared at the ceiling and thought about what I'd said. It wasn't just coffee. It wasn't anything yet. But it was the beginning of something I already didn't know how to stop. Because while he was sanding floors and patching drywall, believing he was building a future for the two of us, I had already opened a door I wasn't supposed to walk through. The morning I met Jared again, I changed my shirt 3 times. Not because I wanted to impress him. At least that's what I told myself. But there's something about revisiting the past that makes you desperate to look like you're doing fine without it. I landed on something simple: jeans, a light sweater, no makeup, just lip balm. Like I wasn't trying. Like I was untouchable. I was already lying to myself before I left the house. David was at the renovation site when I pulled out of the driveway. He waved from the porch, holding a power drill in one hand, dust on his shoulders. I rolled down my window. "Text me if you need anything," he said. "Won't be long," I called back. "Just coffee." He smiled. "Be nice." It hit me then. How soft he still was with me. How easy his trust came. And how easy it was for me to drive away with that trust still in my back pocket, knowing I had no intention of telling him the full truth about what I was walking toward. I met Jared at a cafe tucked into the corner of an old shopping plaza. The kind of place with uneven floors and crooked art that used to mean something before Starbucks flattened the world. He was already there. He hadn't changed much. A little more weathered, maybe. His hair was shorter, his jaw still sharp. He wore a gray Henley, sleeves pushed up, forearms lean and familiar. He looked like trouble that had finally learned to smile about it. "Lena," he said, standing, opening his arms like no time had passed. I let him hug me. It was fast, warm, too familiar. We sat. He ordered for me like he used to. Black coffee with honey. I'd forgotten I even liked it that way. Or maybe I didn't anymore. I didn't correct him. "So, this is weird," he said, grinning. A little. He leaned back, eyes scanning me slowly. "You look good." "You too." Pause. He stirred his coffee, lips pressed together. "I've thought about you." I sipped mine. Heart beat too loud. "Why now?" He shrugged. "I've been sober a year, trying to clean up the past." I blinked. "You were drinking?" He laughed softly. "You didn't know?" I shook my head. "Well," he said, "that's probably for the best." We talked for an hour, about nothing and everything. His job, my marriage, his failed engagement, my quiet house. He never said anything explicit, never reached across the table, but the undercurrent was there. The way he held my gaze too long, how he remembered stories I hadn't thought about in years, how he said my name like it still meant something. When I stood to leave, he touched my elbow. "You look happy," he said. "I am." He nodded. "But are you alive?" I didn't answer, just smiled and walked out, hands shaking. I didn't tell David much about the meeting, just that Jared seemed fine. A little nostalgic, nothing concerning. David didn't press. He trusted me. Again. That night, I laid in bed, wide awake, listening to the soft sounds of my husband sleeping beside me. And all I could think about was Jared's question. "But are you alive?" The next time Jared texted, I replied faster than I meant to. "You free Friday?" I told myself it was for closure, for clarity, for curiosity. I told myself it was safe. It wasn't. We met in the park, neutral ground, sat on a bench and drank coffee again like we were still 29 and invincible. This time he was bolder, said things like, "Do you ever think about what we'd be like if we hadn't burned it down?" And, "I never stopped wanting you, even when I hated you." And the one that broke me, "You look like someone waiting for permission." I didn't kiss him. Not that day, but I let him brush my hair back. I let him touch my hand. And I let myself imagine what it would feel like to fall again. When I got home, David was painting the kitchen cabinets. He had paint on his nose. He looked up and smiled like nothing in his world was broken. "Good day?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "It was." And I walked upstairs before he could see what I'd become. It wasn't planned. I didn't wake up that morning and decide to betray my husband, but I also didn't stop it. And that's the part I can't forgive myself for. Jared texted mid-morning, "Downtown Marriott, room 1417, no pressure. Just wanted to see you without all the noise." I read it twice, then locked my phone. I went back to folding towels, answered a few work emails, took the chicken out of the freezer for dinner. Normal things, quiet things. I stared out the window and saw my life. Neat, clean, organized, safe. And for some reason, all I could think about was the way Jared had looked at me 2 days ago. Like I wasn't someone's wife. Like I was still a woman who could wreck things, who could feel. When I told David I had to go out for a bit, he didn't ask for details, just nodded and said, "Be safe." I hesitated at the door. "It's Jared." He finally looked up from his laptop. "Everything okay?" "I think so," I lied. He sounded not great. "I just want to make sure he's all right." David stared at me for a second longer, then nodded again. "Text me when you get there." That was it. No suspicion, no jealousy, just trust. That trust should have stopped me. But it didn't. I drove downtown with my heart in my throat. Every stoplight felt like a decision point. I could turn around. I could go home. I could pretend this was a mistake I'd never started. But when I pulled into the garage beneath the Marriott, I didn't hesitate. I rode the elevator in silence. The numbers lit up one by one like a countdown. When I knocked, Jared opened the door without a word. And everything after that was motion. It was quiet. Slow. No ripping clothes. No desperate hands. Just eyes. Touch. Breath. He kissed me like someone who had been waiting to finish a sentence for years. I let him. I let it all happen. The bed. The heat. The parts of me I hadn't remembered in years waking up like they'd just been sleeping. It wasn't even about pleasure. Not really. It was about feeling. About being looked at like I mattered. About hearing my own name whispered like a prayer, not just said in passing. After we lay in silence. His hand traced the curve of my hip. I stared at the ceiling, chest tight with something I couldn't name. "I missed you," he said. I didn't answer. Because I didn't miss him. Not exactly. I missed who I was when I was with him. I left before dinner. He didn't ask me to stay. I didn't offer. It wasn't that kind of thing. It never had been. On the drive home, I thought I might cry. But I didn't. I felt flat, scraped out. Like I'd eaten something too sweet, too fast. David was still at the house when I got back. He'd repainted the guest room. The walls were a soft blue, the color I'd picked months ago. He showed me the trim with quiet pride. "Not bad, right?" I nodded. "It's beautiful." He kissed my forehead and said, "You okay?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah, just tired." He didn't ask more. He trusted me, and it made me want to scream. That night, I stood in the shower until the water ran cold. Scrubbed my skin like I could erase what I'd done. But guilt doesn't live in skin. It lives in the way you can't look at someone the same after you've lied to their face. It lives in the silence that grows heavier with every dinner you eat without confessing. It lives in the phone calls you answer in secret, in the texts you delete, in the perfume you wash off before walking through your own front door. Jared texted the next morning, "Still thinking about yesterday. You were glowing." I stared at the message. Then I deleted it, but not before smiling and hating myself for it. There's a kind of heartbreak that doesn't come from being left. It comes from being loved so gently, so completely, that your betrayal feels like a blade pressed into someone sleeping. David had no idea. None. Every evening, he came home with paint on his knuckles and new photos of the progress on his phone. He'd show me the kitchen cabinets, the trim he finally fixed, the built-in shelving he spent 6 hours on, because you always said you wanted that little nook for reading. He was building me a future, and I was meeting my past in hotel rooms during lunch breaks. I became good at lying. Too good. I didn't even have to practice. The words came out of me like water. Just going to meet Rachel for coffee. Need to drop by the office real quick. Thought I'd swing by and check on the paint samples again. He never questioned it. And when I kissed his cheek goodbye, he smiled. When I kissed Jared, I didn't feel like a different person. I felt like the same one, just shifted slightly to the left, like I'd stepped out of the light and into my own shadow. Sometimes I'd come home and David would be on the floor, covered in sawdust, holding a measuring tape in one hand and a sandwich in the other. He looked so tired, so proud. "I can't wait for you to see the master bath," he said one night, beaming. He said it like it was a gift. And it was. And I didn't deserve it. One night, I came back from a late meetup with Jared, and David was already in bed. Not asleep, just quiet, staring at the ceiling. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, "just thinking." I slid in beside him, guilty heat in my throat, and waited for him to say something. Anything. That he was suspicious. That he felt it. That he knew. Instead, he said, "I hope I'm building you a place you'll actually want to be." That one sentence almost broke me. Because how do you answer that when you've already been somewhere else? Jared was getting more persistent, more familiar. He started texting late, calling just to hear your voice. He'd send old photos from when we were younger, when things were messy and wild and passionate in ways David and I had never been. One afternoon, he said, "You were always the one. You just got scared. Tell me I'm wrong." And for a second, I believed him. Because when someone offers you the version of yourself you lost years ago, it's hard not to reach for it, even when you know it's not real anymore. David surprised me that weekend with flowers and takeout. "We've been so busy. Let's slow down tonight," he said. We ate on the floor of our half-renovated living room, picnic style, like when we were broke and newly married and didn't have a couch yet. He poured wine into mismatched mugs, told me I looked pretty. I felt like a stranger in my own skin. He touched me that night, gently, like he was trying to remember something soft between us. I let him, but I kept my eyes closed and imagined something else. The worst part wasn't the lying. It wasn't even the cheating. It was the way I started watching David as if he were a character in a movie I'd already seen. Predictable, kind, loyal, and completely unaware of how badly I was unraveling. I stopped asking about the house. Stopped commenting on the work he was doing. He didn't call me out on it. Maybe he didn't want to see it either. Maybe we both knew something was slipping, and neither of us had the courage to say it. But Jared noticed. "You're colder after you see him," he said one day, pulling back the blanket. I sat up. "What do you want me to do?" He shrugged. "Tell the truth." I laughed. "You first." Because Jared was chaos in a handsome package, a fantasy with too many cracks to survive real life. But David was the one actually building me a life. I just wasn't sure I wanted to live in it anymore. He said it right after. We were lying on a hotel bed, the window open to let in the city noise. I was half covered in a thin sheet, his hand lazily tracing the outline of my shoulder blade. He whispered it like it was a truth he'd been carrying too long. "I never stopped loving you, Lena. Not really." I didn't answer right away, because part of me wanted it, needed it, and part of me didn't believe a word. But I looked over at him and said, "Then why didn't you fight for me?" He blinked. I did. "You were the one who left." He wasn't wrong. Not completely. But he also wasn't the man I could count on back then. not when it mattered. He disappeared when things got too hard. He drank too much. He burned every bridge with a smirk and a shrug. I walked away because I was tired of bleeding for someone who didn't know how to stop cutting. Now, a decade later, he was lying in bed with me. Steady, clean, warm, saying all the things I used to beg for. But the timing was too perfect. Too convenient. He asked me to leave David that day. Not with anger, not even pressure. Just quiet confidence. "You're not happy," he said. "You don't look at him the way you used to. You don't look at me the way you look at him." That made me pause. Is that a compliment? It's a fact. I sat up, wrapped the sheet around myself, stared out the window. Jared came up behind me, arms sliding around my waist. We were electric, Lena. Still are. And maybe he was right. But electricity burns. I went home that night and found David asleep on the couch, paint samples fanned out across the coffee table, a notepad full of scribbles next to his hand. He'd been planning a surprise, sketching new cabinet ideas for my dream kitchen. I knew because the title at the top of the page was in all caps, "For Lena, don't show until it's perfect." I sat on the floor beside him and watched him breathe. This man, who never yelled, never lied, never touched another woman while married to me. He was building me a life from scratch. And I was tearing it down piece by piece behind his back. The next time Jared texted, I didn't reply. He waited a day, then another. Did I say something wrong? I typed out a response, deleted it. He called. I didn't answer. It wasn't about guilt. It was about clarity. Because what he made me feel, alive, wanted, desired, it wasn't enough anymore. Not when I realized it came with conditions, with fantasy, with old stories trying to pass as new ones. The last time I saw Jared, he was sitting outside the cafe where we first met again. I didn't plan to see him. I was driving by and spotted him. Same seat, same smirk, head bent over his phone. I parked, stood across the street. And I didn't go in, because I knew if I walked through that door, I'd go backwards. And I'd never stop. That night, David made us dinner. Not takeout, real food. Pasta, salad, garlic bread. He wore a ridiculous apron I forgot we even owned. He was humming, happy. I couldn't eat. When he sat beside me, he kissed my cheek and said, "I know I've been distant. I'm trying to fix that." And just like that, I was the one holding the lie. He didn't know. Still doesn't. But I think he felt it. In the way I touched him with careful hands. In the way I smiled too quickly. Kissed too lightly. Pulled away too fast. Sometimes I wonder if he's just waiting for the words. And I wonder if I'll ever be brave enough to say them. Jared loved me, maybe. But David chose me. Over and over. And somehow that feels worse. Because I betrayed the one man who actually showed up. He finished the house in May. I remember because the flowers were starting to bloom again, and the air smelled like fresh-cut grass and wood dust. He walked me through each room, holding my hand like a kid showing off his science project. "This is ours now," he said, eyes bright. "Everything, from the floors to the ceilings, every inch of it has you in mind." I nodded, smiled, let him kiss me, but inside I felt hollow. Because every corner he proudly pointed to, I'd already filled with secrets. The kitchen backsplash we'd picked together. I texted Jared about it from the hotel lobby, still red-cheeked and breathless. The reading nook by the window. That was the night David stayed up sketching designs while I was lying next to someone else. The soft blue walls in the guest room. David painted those on a Saturday. I told him I was shopping for curtains. I was in a Marriott. We moved in the first week of June. Fresh paint, new appliances, everything clean, untouched, and humming with hope. David carried me over the threshold like it was our wedding night again. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I didn't know how else to survive the weight of it. He set me down in the living room and said, "We made it." And I said, "Yeah, we did." But I hadn't made anything. I'd unraveled. And now I was standing in the life he'd built with his bare hands, unsure of who I was in it anymore. At night, I'd walk the hallways in socks, fingers trailing along the smooth edges of newly installed walls. Everything smelled new, but nothing felt like home. David was so happy, so proud. He hosted dinners, showed it off to friends, toasted to a new chapter. He'd say things like, "You and me, this is what forever looks like." And every time I smiled, because what else could I do? I deleted Jared's number, blocked him, removed old messages, photos, everything. But I couldn't delete the memory, couldn't block out the way I'd felt waking up in a place where no one needed me to be good. Sometimes that's worse than the cheating, realizing how easily you could do it again. Tom asked me one night if I felt happy. We were lying in bed, the ceiling fan spinning above us, the new sheets still stiff from the first wash. He had one hand behind his head, the other lightly resting on my leg. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. I didn't answer right away. He turned his head toward me. "Lena?" "I'm trying," I said. He nodded. "Me too." That was the most honest conversation we'd had in months. I never told him. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't look him in the eye and say, "I betrayed you while you were pouring your love into something we both dreamed of." Some truths don't fix anything. They just destroy more. Now, months later, I still sit in this house. His house, our house, surrounded by walls he built, windows he cleaned, light fixtures he installed with care. And I wonder if he ever walks into a room and feels it. The ghost of something he doesn't know is there. The echo of a version of me he'll never meet again. I wake early these days, make coffee, sit at the kitchen island and look out into the yard. I imagine what it would have felt like if I had never answered Jared's message, if I'd shut the door before it ever cracked open. I imagine being someone I could still respect. And sometimes I imagine what David would say if I told him the truth. Then I imagine his face, the way he'd go quiet, the way his hands might stop mid-gesture, like he'd suddenly forgotten what they were made to do. And I stay silent. The house is done. The marriage is standing. But me? I'm still under construction.